Welcome to The Recovering Perfectionist, where you'll learn all the hacks you need to get started and finished on your business or project. You'll connect with successful entrepreneurs who are in perfectionist rehab, unapologetically experimenting and balancing life, business, family, and me time. I'm your host and Chief Recovering Perfectionist, Claire Barton. Hey, Recovering Perfectionist, it's Claire. Today on the show, I have Lisa Murray, who, I don't even know where to start explaining what she does. She is a absolute ball of energy, is the best way that I can describe Lisa. I've met her a couple of times in person, and she spoke at one of my monthly networking events recently as well, and just completely blew everyone away. She talks a lot about energy and creativity and play in your business. Remember that thing? She's a really interesting woman, and I know that you're going to love this conversation that I have with her today, because she's really inspirational. She just does so many different things. There's some beautiful artwork on her website when you check that out, or on her business cards, and you're like, oh, where did you get all that beautiful artwork? And she's like, oh, I just did it. I just made that art. She's so interesting and absolutely gorgeous. So I can't wait to hear what you think about the episode and what you think about the combo that we have. Definitely follow her. She is amazingly interesting. I think I've said that about 3 times already. She's a very interesting person to follow. She's just inspirational, and I absolutely love her work, and I know you will too. Hi everyone, it's Claire, and I have got Lisa Murray, who is a creation catalyst, with me today. How are you going, Lisa?
Hey Claire, I'm great, thank you.
Wonderful to finally have you. Lisa, before we get started, Creation Catalyst, tell us more about that. Who are you? What do you do? What's your business? So you can probably articulate it a lot better.
Yeah, it depends. It depends on the day. That's the funny thing. When you say, who are you? I'm like, I'm not sure. But what it really comes to, for years, I've played with all the energies of creativity, and far beyond the arty creativity, very much being creative in every area of your life, your business, bringing play into business, all these kinds of things. And I've played around and around and through it. And really what I came to maybe about a year ago was that I'm a creation catalyst. Literally, when people want to create an idea or create something, they come to me, and I'm the catalyst for then giving them a sense of how they can do that, what it can look like, what are the possibilities with it that maybe they haven't thought of. And so then in my business, I do that in all kinds of different ways. Sometimes I do branding with people. Sometimes I do straight out strategy. Other times it's much more about the really playful, fun stuff, and actually allowing people to enjoy their work. Because I had burnout really severely quite a few years ago, and I noticed how much that was caused by not being willing to be in the creative energies and not being willing to actually let things flow, basically. So I play all around all those different things. I've got lots of different programs and memberships and things that cover off all of that.
I love it. So the first time that I ever came across you, Lisa, was at a networking event, probably about 1.5 years ago, late 2015. And I was very new to the online business world. I was really just sort of starting to dip my toe, and I thought I knew everything I needed to know. And I was kind of in that space of, oh my gosh, what am I doing? This is so out of my comfort zone, and it was a little bit crazy. And you came along and with this beautiful bundle of energy, who just kind of talked about following the energy. And I know someone asked a question, you had lots of different projects on, you were doing lots of speaking, you were involved in horse therapy and that sort of thing, you were doing lots of overseas travel, and it was just like, oh my God, all of these things are possible, and she's doing these things, I can do these things. It was a really, really beautiful kind of thing. But I remember someone asking you, so how do you choose which project to work on first? And your answer was, I go with the energy. Or I think you said something like, I ask the projects, or I ask the universe or something, which one's now. And you can sort of just feel it, and you're a very practiced practitioner of energy and that sort of thing. So it sort of came naturally to you. But I was like, what the hell is she talking about? So naturally, I then stalked you online, lovingly and not in a creepy way. And I looked into you, and I follow you very closely. You've obviously came to speak at the networking event that I run monthly as well. And I'm just a little bit obsessed with your work and your messaging. I love all of your videos and your Facebooks and that sort of thing. But I guess the thing I really want to talk about today is that sort of follow your energy. It's become a hashtag that I use quite a lot. Hashtag follow the energy. Hashtag Lisa Murray enthusiast. But yeah, it's really been something that I've tried to sort of tap into for my business and also for, you know, my personal life and my, you know, everything that I kind of do. And it's something that I also try and, you know, work with my clients when I'm coaching and that sort of thing, when they've got so much on and there's so many competing priorities and that sort of thing. So for the audience who are recovering perfectionists, obviously, I'd love to sort of understand, like, how did you kind of get okay with following the energy? Is it something you've always done, or is it a practice thing about, you know, not just doing things because they're on your to-do list, but actually tapping into the energy of all that sort of thing? So I'd love to know a bit more about that part of your thing.
Yeah, cool. You know, it's so interesting because I also was really fully a perfectionist. And when I was coming on your show, I was like, oh, that's so exciting because, like, I can really see how far I've come with that, which is like, you know, quite a nice thing to acknowledge.
Right.
And so what I would say is I've always had the capacity to follow the energy. Like, I can look back at certain points in my life and go, oh yeah, I was doing it then, I was doing it then, I was doing it then. And then I can look at other parts of my life where I can see I was just a total control freak, perfectionist, you know, who was not following the energy at all and suffering greatly as a result, you know. And I want to talk a little bit about what this means, because people are like, are you crazy? You know, when they hear it the first time, they're like, how can that even work?
Yeah.
You know, and so I have
really
to ask you that, has it
what
worked for you?
energy
Like,
was.
is it changing something for you?
Yeah. I didn't even understand really what energy was when people kept talking about that. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, well, energy is a lot of different things to different people, of course, too. But one thing I would say is that when I say follow the energy, what I'm looking at is following where there's the most energy, because there's some things that have got a lot of energy on them, and then there's some things that are like, yeah, that would be fun, but there's not actually a lot of sort of what I would call a platform of energy underneath it. Okay. And so, you know, when something just pulls you so hard you can't ignore it, right? Like when one of your kids is calling you, right?
Yep.
That's, you know, there's an energy there. So that's the thing of energy. We actually all know energy, even if we think we don't, right? And so this following the energy thing is literally looking at, well, okay. And for me, the question I tend to ask is, if I was going to create the greatest possibilities today, or if I was going to create the greatest for now in the future, what would I choose to do right now? And usually out of all my projects, and I do have a lot, you're right about that, I've always got a lot, there's something that pops, there's something that goes, hey, me, you know. And sometimes it can be a really big surprise, like we were talking about before we got on the show, where, you know, I was saying to Claire, I renamed my business last week. Now, that's not a thing most people would undertake lightly. And literally I did it all within about 3 hours from when I got the idea to when it was done. Now, that was totally following the energy, because the energy of the new name was so full on and so in my face. And it was like, you cannot ignore me. It was so clear. And so that was a really clear message. And of course, with everything that I'm creating at the moment, it's perfect timing. It works really well with, and it's got this sort of palpable difference in the, because every word has energy. So now I'm just going to give you a whole thing on energy. But every word has an energy attached to it. And so when you change the business or you do something like that, you change the energy of the business. So literally by doing that last week, I changed the energy of my business as well. And so then when I go to follow the energy today, I can't go from last month's reference points. You have to be in the question and actually go, okay, well, is that still going to work? Is that still going to work? Do I need to change this? And so being in the question, actually, every time you ask a question, it gives you more energy to be aware of. Does that make sense?
So you're constantly, it's like a decision that you're constantly making, or you're constantly sort of checking in with. It's not just I'm following this energy and then 3 months later you're like, oh, whoops, I forgot to see if it was still working.
It's what, you know, in Access Consciousness, they call 10-second choices. Because literally what you're doing is saying, because some things come to you and you follow the energy because they're there for information. They're not necessarily there for you to create the entire program or to follow it through to finishing. And this is something, particularly for perfectionists who want to finish everything really, really, really neatly and get it all tied up perfectly, it doesn't always work like that with following the energy, because what happens is, I'm going to give you an example because it's probably easier. So for the last 8 years, I've been creating content like a mad thing. Like, I've created so much content. And in the last maybe 6 or 12 months, I've been going, well, what am I going to do with all that content? It seems crazy just to leave it sitting on my computer. And then the week before the name change, I got the idea of a membership site. I'm like, oh, of course, all of that content will easily work into that membership site. Yeah. And I'll present it in a different way, and I'm going to create the experience in a different way. But what I can see looking back is that all of those things that on the surface looked so random, actually were bringing me to this point. And if you look back at your life and what you've created in your career and in your life, you'll see how lots of different choices brought you to a particular point. And then you can allow it to open up. So, of course, it brought me to a particular point, which gives me like a system for how I'm going to use the content. But now, in asking questions and going, okay, so what else is there to know about this? There's also a whole lot of other ideas that I randomly had that I could never get to fit in my business model. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
And so literally sorry, I think I've got a mozzie biting my back. So literally what happens when you follow the energy is you have to trust yourself. You actually have to trust your intuition. Yeah, I know, right? And it's not always easy, and especially for a perfectionist. Like, I really do know that one. It's not always easy because, of course, we want it to be right the first time.
That's
so
right.
much of what I've created has been about the adventure and enjoying the process.
Yeah.
And when you enjoy the process, it's always taking you forward. And you've got to then be willing to connect the dots. So I wonder, do you see that in your own life? Like, have you seen actually how that works? Maybe in more subtle ways than what?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's been a really big part of my journey, and now my journey in helping other, recovering perfectionists who also are just over that kind of inertia that you get when you're trying to be perfectionist. Because a lot of people have, like you said, they want to finish everything and it all has to be tied up with a pretty bow and it has to have all the bells and whistles and that sort of thing. But I think what freaks people out even before that is the planning and actually getting started. So if you've got sort of an idea that comes to you, I feel like perfectionists are less likely to actually get started on it until they've completely over-planned it and over-engineered it, so they need to know what the end product looks like. I used to be exactly the same. Like, my mantra when I was in corporate was, you tell me where we need to be at the end and I'll work out how to get us there. Like, I could do big picture, but the detail is definitely my strength. But I had this kind of thing, like, if I have to pick the end state, it just gets away from me, because then I'm like, oh, and we should do this too, and we should do this, and we should also put this on the end, and then we could do this, and then to the point where it just became too overwhelming, and I'd be like, oh, stop it, I'm not even going to start, because it just got sort of too hard. Whereas now I feel so much more comfortable with going, oh, that sounds interesting, or that feels interesting. I'm just going to play. I'm just going to experiment and just start. No idea where it's going to end up. No idea. It's still a little bit uncomfortable for me. I'm still recovering, not recovered. I'm still in rehab. But it does feel a lot easier now to kind of just feel like I've seen the process with myself, and I've seen it with so many other people as well. I'm kind of okay with wherever it ends up is fine, whether it's finished or not finished. And like you said, if it's part of the, if you enjoy the process, and sometimes even if you don't enjoy the process, you're still learning from that. You're still getting information from that sort of thing. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I've noticed a lot of times that I might have, I have a lot of unfinished projects, but I also make sure I finish, because I found out that I wasn't a good finisher. So I had to put a bit of a strategy in place for that. But I noticed that often I might end up with 4 or 5 projects, or even more sometimes, that actually the unfinished bits of it come together to create something else. And this is what I call unplanning, right? It's literally, if I follow the energy on all these different things, and sometimes I've created something, not putting it out in the world, not knowing what it was for. And then like a week or 3 later, someone will say, hey, do you have anything about such and such? I'll go, well, as a matter of fact, I do. And there's this kind of futurist capacity
Yeah.
that comes when you're willing to follow the energy, because actually you start to create for the future as well. And, you know, I think it's a really great gift we give ourselves to allow ourselves not to have to plan everything. And like, because I really, like, I mean, I did an MBA. I was good at planning, you know. And then I realized that actually when I plan, what happens is if you stick to the plan, you miss those detours that actually could show you the thing you're really looking for.
Completely agree.
And so it's funny. Planning, I go in and out of it. My new thing, it's planning, but only to a point.
Yes.
Yeah, just enough to get it moving.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I did a blog on this a couple of months ago where I said business planning is killing your business. And that was really uncomfortable for me because I'm a planner. That's the thing I do. That's how I make my money. That's what my business is based around, right? And that's how my life kind of works. And that's how I like to live. But I also, when it comes to business planning, I guess there's two sides of that. The one side, we often, especially pre-startup or during that startup phase, people think you have to have a business plan. Like you have to have that 150-page document because 20 years ago, that's how you started the business. You had this, you know, whopping great business plan that covered the next 20 years. And it was basically in an effort to get funding, right? That's pretty much, you know, the only thing. That's the only thing I would say nowadays, if you need to do it for the bank. Don't do it for yourself. Like, you know, all that sort of thing. I like the 80-20 rule. So if you plan 80%, then you've still got 20% of flexibility and opportunity, like being more open to opportunities and ideas and that sort of thing. Because I think especially when you're starting out, it's really important not to know exactly what your business is going to look like in a year or 5 years and that sort of thing. Because if you try and over plan it so much, you end up either sticking to your plan for the sake of sticking to your plan, or you stray from the plan and then you beat yourself up for straying from the plan because you're straying from the plan and that's not what you said you were going to do, which just feels really stifling. Like it just completely defeats the purpose of being an entrepreneur and working for yourself and that sort of thing. And there's so many things that I guess I had planned for, and I was having the same conversation recently that there's so many people who I've worked with in the last 6 months who I initially was like, where were you at the beginning of my business? Why didn't I get to do this work on client experience or branding or I don't know, technical stuff or whatever? Why I needed you at the beginning of my business. And then another hour on, I thought actually that would have been a complete waste of time, because if I'd done the work a year ago or 2 years ago, I would have been creating something that was such a bad fit for where I'm at now, which has been part of the process of trial and error and that sort of thing. So I think, like it sounds strange because I am a planner, that's my thing, but I also say don't over plan things. Like you have to have space. And have you read Big Magic? I'm sure you would have read.
Actually, no. I haven't, because I've got it on my Kindle. But I didn't. Well, because when I was writing my book, I didn't want to be influenced by it.
Sure.
Because it would have been weird for me to be influenced by it. So actually, it's on the list of. Yep, I'm going to get to that soon.
Yeah. Oh, I've not finished it, but she talked. One of her things is that ideas are a thing. Like an idea kind of goes between people, and if an idea comes to you and you don't do something with it quickly enough, or it's not, it doesn't sit well with you, or you're scared to take it on or whatever, it'll go to the next person. Someone else will do that thing. And that's where I thought, when I first started reading that part of the book, I was like, what are you talking about? But I can think of all these examples during the past, so many things where I've gone, that's an awesome idea, I'll do that. And then the next week someone's out going, hey, look at my shiny new thing. And I'm like, what? That was my thing. That was my idea. I'm like, I didn't do anything with it quickly enough. I didn't kind of grab onto that energy. I was just like, I'll write it down in my notebook and then I'll do it later. And it's, that sort of thing is kind of crazy, but I guess that's sort of the energy thing where the idea is just like, oh, well, I'm going to someone who's going to make me happen quick because I'm getting out there, sort of thing. So it was a really interesting concept, which I would love to, have a chat with you about once you've read the book and we can pull that one apart.
I know about the concept. There was a book called One, O-N-E, by Richard Bach. It was written in probably the 70s or the 80s.
Okay.
And for a long time, it was one of my favorite books. And he literally talks about there's an idea foundry, an idea factory, and there's idea fairies. And he talks about a very similar energy to what you just described. And I do know this because I have this experience in my own life. And at one point I was really asking a lot of questions about it because, you know, I would go shopping for a navy jacket and there would be no navy jackets in the stores and I'd be really annoyed. And then 3 years later, there would be navy jackets everywhere. And this happens a lot for me with clothes, with a lot of different things. And I was talking to one of my mentors one day and I was just saying, how the hell does this work? Like, what's the deal here? Right. And he's like, well, by your request, you're creating it in the world. You don't have to physically create it. So you having the idea is a request. And so you can either do it or someone else. And so for me, what I've learned is always to ask, is this idea for me now? Because I have trillions of ideas and you can't physically do them all. And some of them I don't even want to do, you know? And so literally I always ask that question with ideas because then I don't get bent out of shape when someone else creates it.
Yeah.
So it's a fun way to play with it. Yeah, that book's really awesome. If you ever wanted to get a sense of what we're talking about, that book has a really cool way of putting it. It was one of my favorite things for a long time.
I'll put a link in the show notes as well for anyone who's wanting to listen. Can you just say what it was again, and I'll look it up as well?
It's Richard Bach is the writer.
Okay.
And he's an American writer, and it was called One, O-N-E. Okay. And it was literally about the idea that everything is one, and that, of course, you know, the ideas are just there, and anyone can tap into them. So literally, if you want an idea, you can go, well, where's the ideas that I can create? And they'll come to you.
So for anyone who's kind of new to this and new to hearing about energy and following the energy and trusting the process and tapping into ideas and that sort of thing, is there kind of a process that you, or steps or tips that you can give to people to be able to kind of tap into that? Or is it really just a literally shutting up and listening to the energy?
Yeah, I wouldn't say there's one process. And for me, it evolves as I change and as I expand my capacities with being creative and creating, my process changes. And what I can do now, I couldn't have done 5 years ago. So what I would say is, if you're interested in it, my Stop Waiting, Start Creating book does give a lot of foundational kinds of things in a simpler form, probably. But really, it's this thing of being willing to be not in control. And see, most perfectionists are really obsessed with being in control.
Right, yeah.
And
I use them interchangeably.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah. And so for me, one of the biggest things over the last few years has literally been teaching myself how to let go of control. Because the more I'm willing to let go of control, the more I'm open then to those ideas, to that energy. Because if you're not open to the energy, you won't even know that it's there. Another one of my mentors once said to me, what if you're too wonderful to be perfect? When he was trying to get me to be a little less controlling.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I love it.
And that actually helped me a lot. Yeah. Because it has this energy of, you're not wrong, you know, because I think a lot of people, when they're controlling things, they're wanting to be right, not wrong. And it kind of takes it out of the right and wrong. Like, there's always a thing with perfection where there's right and wrong. And I've noticed for myself, it's been much easier since I took myself out of that space, because then the ideas are just free to come to you and you can play with them or not.
Yeah.
And there is no right or wrong if you play with them or not.
Yeah. No, I really love the idea of it. And I know we've talked about the what if you're too wonderful to be perfect before. And I've had this saying for a little while that's kind of been on my radar. I guess it's an energy or an idea that's sort of come to me, which is around better than perfect. And most people will think, what's better than perfect? And I'm like, imperfect. Unapologetically imperfect is so much better than perfect. Yeah. And, you know, like you said, perfect I use interchangeably with control freak and avoidance. Like, often perfectionism is avoidance, or it's fear, or it's just procrastination, or, you know, there's various different types of perfectionism. And I'm not a psychologist or anything like that, but there's, you know, lots of different kind of versions and masks, or perfectionism can be a mask for something as well. And God, it's just been such a liberating process. Like, when, you know, and I've talked before about the process of how the recovering perfectionist came to be. And interestingly, since I've started using that phrase as my podcast and my Facebook group name and on a lot of my products and that sort of thing, it was like the final nail in the coffin of my perfectionism, because now I can't be perfect. I can't do anything perfectly, or people will think I'm a hypocrite, and I don't like that. So it's kind of like I've given myself permission by holding the space for other people. I've given myself permission to completely not do anything perfectly. And it's really resonated. People have sort of come out and just gone, oh, thank God, this is exactly where I need to be. That's exactly what I am. And a lot of that, like it's mainly women who I work with, and everyone's kind of got their own getting over their perfectionism story. And sometimes it's been quite extreme. Sometimes it's had to do with relationships. Sometimes it's had to do with becoming a parent. Sometimes it's been some other sort of trauma that's just kind of made them go, oh, I haven't got the time for this. I haven't got the energy. And this is not, and people use that word, I haven't got the energy for it. I just don't have the energy to be perfect anymore. And it's just, it just makes such a big difference when you can actually give it a name and you actually make a decision to stop giving a shit about all the wrong things and to actually listen to the things like inside you rather than what everyone else is expecting from you. Because I think a lot of perfectionism is trying to impress other people. And I've had this conversation before as well. Like I still do things to a standard that other people would probably think I'm being perfectionist. But the difference for me is that I know I'm doing it for me now. Like I look around my house, it's lovely and tidy, it's nicely decorated, it's clean, it feels beautiful to me. I don't care if someone, like if it's messy and people are coming around, I don't really care. But if it can be nice and neat and tidy, I do that before I go to bed, just so that I can wake up and go, this is it. But it's for me. I'm not making it perfect because I might get a visitor, and that's a really kind of big distinction. So I absolutely love it.
It's a really great distinction, actually, because I think when we unhook ourselves from that space where we're doing everything for other people and unconsciously doing everything for other people, unconsciously being what we're being for other people, it creates so much freedom and so much space. Oh, hi.
This is my George. He's a permanent fixture on the podcast.
Very cute. Hi, George.
Sorry, you were saying when you unhook yourself from other people's expectations.
Yeah, I know, but now I'm just obsessed with the dog, So this is the thing, right? Short attention span. Yeah. Unhooking yourself from everyone else's like projections of what they would like you to be. And even like, because one thing I remember once having a meeting with a boss, and it was about 2 hours long, and I wrote down this list of 10,000 things that I had to do, and at the end I read it all back to him and said, this is what you want me to do. And he looks at me, he goes, no, Lisa, I gave you that for information. You don't have to do any of it. And I remember being shell-shocked. Like, I was like, what? Because I'd never had anyone give me something just for information.
Right.
And so it was this really interesting thing of like, I realized how tapped in I was to knowing what other people need, or thinking I knew what other people needed, delivering that when it wasn't even required. And over the years, I've unhooked myself from that more and more and more, to the point where now I'm, there's still moments when I do it, but most of the time I'm like, oh no, I'm just going to be me. And it's much more fun that way.
Yes. Yeah. I'm listening to an audiobook called The Life-Changing Magic of Not Giving a Fuck by Sarah Knight, I think is her name. Have you read it or listened to it?
I haven't, but I've seen it. Yeah. It looks awesome.
It's absolutely brilliant. I'm not quite finished it, but she talks a lot about, she's got, 4 different sections about stopping caring about, or not stopping caring about, but just stopping, putting all your energy into and that sort of thing. And one of them is work and meetings and all of that sort of thing. And I just think, everyone who's working in corporate, anyone who's doing anything ever in life should listen to this book. It's just so good about really choosing where to spend your energy and that sort of thing. But yeah, that sort of thing in the corporate world, I was exactly the same. And I also call myself a recovering yes girl. That, I was always, if anyone ever asked me if I could do anything, I would say yes. Yep, no worries. Because part of me is a server. I like to serve. I like to, make everyone else's life easier. And I'm very perceptive as well. So I can kind of, like the same as you, I would be sitting in a meeting and I'd just hear that there was a problem with something, and without being asked, I'd fix it the next day. So it didn't ever have to be an issue anymore. Like it was an over and above thing and that sort of thing. Usually that was okay, but it was very, I suppose, sapping of my energy. And you start to resent it pretty quickly when you're not getting, when it's not your thing, and then no one recognizes it anyway and all that sort of thing. So,
yeah. Well, it's exhausting, actually. When you do and do and do and do without following the energy, people aren't grateful. That's one thing because when I got the burnout, I was like, how the hell did I end up here? And I noticed that for all those things that I did that I could see so clearly needed doing and whatever, people hadn't noticed and they weren't grateful. And I was basically using up all of my creative energy in ways that weren't fulfilling for me. They were kind of based on need. And I think for perfectionists, we're really good at basing everything on the needs rather than on the creative possibilities and rather than on what would actually be fun for us, because when I look back, like I used to put problem solver on my CV and people would give me jobs with problems to solve. And when I look back, I'm like, man, I must have been insane. Like, how dumb am I? And now, of course, yes, can I solve things really easily? Do I want to? Not unless someone's going to be really grateful for it.
That's
and really
right.
rewarding.
Yeah.
And it's such a different energy. And of course, then you don't get burnout. You don't get, all sort of your knickers in a knot about all these things that aren't right.
Yeah.
Because you're not solving things that aren't perfect anymore.
Yeah. Oh, what a relief.
I know. It is.
Lisa, I could sit and talk to you all day, but I'm going to go and follow the energy and create stuff. I just absolutely love chatting with you. So thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. It's been my pleasure. Thanks for having me. And I wonder if people just had a day of following the energy, how many adventures they could have.
Very interesting. Answer it for yourselves, audience. Let us know what you come up with. Just quickly, actually, Lisa, I have penciled in, starting back in December, I penciled in a nothing day once a month on every fourth Friday. It's the first day of my cycle, actually, and I always feel a bit, I just want to chill. And interestingly, a couple of those days I've kind of been sitting around, or I've gone for a massage, or I've gone for a coffee, and then I've kind of looked over at my laptop and I'm like, keep watching TV for a few minutes, and then I look back over at my laptop and I'm like, God, there's a thing that wants to be done. And I purposely don't do client work, I don't do calls or anything like that. But that's a really interesting way to kind of get my brain goes, oh, it's a play day, it's not a work day, and I still want to create that thing. So that's a really interesting kind of sign sometimes. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I literally just lie on the couch and watch TV all day, and that's quite delightful as well. But yeah, it's really interesting. So your question was, you wonder if everyone took one day off?
Well, literally just take a day, because it's very hard, I think, initially for people to just go, I'm just going to follow the energy. Like, it took me a few years of practice and bit by bit to get really good at it, because there is these moments where you still really want to control everything. But one of the things I did was literally go, okay, so what if literally just for this one day I would just follow the energy and I would do anything that felt like it was really had a bit of a lightness to it, a bit of expansiveness, a bit of fun to it. And then so if you just do it for one day, or even for an hour, for some people they might want to start with an hour, it'll make a difference. And then just see what adventures can show up from that. And where you can go that maybe you didn't expect to.
I love it. And I love the words you use. I love mixing play. Like, no one talks about play anymore. Play and creativity and lightness and all that sort of thing. So I absolutely love it. Where can we find out more? Obviously, there's your book. Is that on your website?
Yes. So yes, it is on my website. Or you can just go to stopwaiting.startcreating.com.
Okay.
And my new website is going to be Creative Alchemy with an I, not a Y at the end, .com. And it will be up in the next week or so. So, or creativitylab.tv if you.
Great. By the time this is published, it will definitely be ready. So we'll put all the new links in the show notes.
Cool, thank you.
Awesome, Lisa. Thank you so much. I just feel I feel so good every time I talk to you. I just love it. It's wonderful.
Well, thank you, Claire. It's been fun.
All right, enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll talk to you really soon.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, bye. And that is absolutely it, my lovely. So I hope you've really enjoyed the episode. It was great fun recording that one, as it is with all of them. If you'd like to connect, I'd love to stay in touch with you. I have a beautiful Facebook group community at bit.ly/The Recovering Perfectionist Crew with all capital T, R, P and C. I have a massive goal this year to get 50,000 downloads on my podcast, and I've got a YouTube show as well. So I'd love for you to help me out if you can by either subscribing to the podcast on iTunes. So if you want to go over and do that now, that would be awesome. If you have a couple of favourite episodes, or if there's one favourite episode that you've really enjoyed, I would love you to share that with anyone who you think would get as much out of it as you have as well. And while you're in iTunes, if you can jump in and give it a review, that would be amazing. iTunes definitely helps out podcasts that have got some good ratings and reviews and some really interactive listeners. So I would really appreciate your help with getting to my goal of 50,000 in 2017. The show is also available over on YouTube. The links are always in the show notes, so you can head over there. So it's The Recovering Perfectionist on YouTube. There's a channel for that as well. So jump in and leave your comments. You can watch all of the episodes in video. So if you want to see what we look like and our crazy hand gestures and facial expressions and all of that sort of thing, absolutely jump in. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel show as well, and then you'll be kept up to date when there's some new episodes that come in there. So yeah, love your support. And if you want to shoot me an email, it's hello@clairebarton.com.au. Always happy to receive your emails and, yeah, open up a conversation. All right, big love. I'll chat with you soon. Bye.